Hello YouTube, and hello Bible thumping wingnut. Just outside having a cigarette. It's kind of late, but I watched your video on your latest one on morality. Now, the point of the video seems to be that if you can't ground morality on a foundation, then you can't rationally make moral judgments. Right. That I think is the point. And since atheists don't have God, they don't have any way to ground morality in a foundation, and therefore they aren't justified in making moral judgments. Right. I think that's the line of argument that you seem to be hammering home. Now, obviously, I don't agree with this, right? Like, it's just clear. You know. Now, let's get into why, though, right? So, first of all, your first premise, right? The idea that in order to make moral judgments, you have to have a firm moral foundation. This to me is stupid. It doesn't work. I mean, you're getting the cart before the horse. The fact of the matter is, in our real life, in the practical world wherein we engage, we make moral judgments all the time, right? Those moral judgments are not contingent on some meta-ethical theory, right? Regardless of whether or not somebody has done their reading on moral philosophy, for instance, someone can condemn rape, right? Like, clearly that's true. Now, the question that's interesting from a philosophical perspective is the hermeneutic question. Okay, like, we know that rape is wrong, but how is rape wrong, right? So that move, right, from the ethical to the meta-ethical is where you're confusing yourself, right? They're not identical discourses. The know-how and the know-that are separate things. And the know-that is not contingent on the know-how. So that's the first point. It's just a mistake. We don't start from some theory and then work our way to ethical positions. We have ethical positions, and from there we derive theories about what's going on when we adopt those positions. Now, the question about God, right, is interesting. So, saying that you can't ground morality without God or you can't ground an absolute morality without God. Makes a few errors. First of all, there are I'm going to point out two errors that you're making. I think that this assumes a false dichotomy between subjectivity and objectivity, and it assumes a false dichotomy between facts and opinions, right? If something is not inscribed into being itself, then it is just your subjective opinion or something. I don't accept this. I think that what this dichotomy misses is the domain of the social. I think that what happens between people is not reducible to two agents, right? So in other words, there are emergent properties to society. So as a result, there are facts, there are opinions, and then there are also norms, right? If I hold a door for somebody, that interaction is predicated on sort of a matrix of norms, right? Um, so just the very fact that that it's not an either or proposition between facts and opinions means that the proposition that if you don't have some transcendent authority, it is therefore just your opinion, right? It means that that proposition is untenable. It doesn't work. Doesn't make sense. And things are much more complex than that. Now, the other thing that I want to point out here is that what you're assuming, you're making assumptions about subjectivity when you say that if it's not transcendent, then you have no basis, right? This assumes a sort of tabula rasa subjectivity. This is a Kantian point, and as somebody who's on YouTube spouting moral theory, I'm sure you know all about Kantian ethics, so I won't go into the nitty-gritty here. But the basic point is that subjectivity has a structure, right? Subjectivity, to be a subject, comes with it certain things, right? There are certain necessities that are bound to subjectivity. Tied to that, I think within that fact, within the fact that subjectivity has some content, you can unpack the idea that, or you can at least advance the idea that part of that structure of subjectivity is tied to ethics. So revulsion at the sight of murder, I'd imagine, is you could make a case that that's something that's very much ingrained in human subjectivity. It's not something that is like culturally conditioned or something like that. Nor is it an opinion, right? It's something that is universal, right? It's something that we all share, and it's something that, and if somebody doesn't, right, we recognize them as being a psychopath, right? We recognize that as an abnormality in the human subject, in some way a damaging of the human subject. So that being said, I mean, that's sufficient grounds to say that there is such a thing as universal morality. You don't need to appeal outside, right? You don't need to appeal to some transcendent authority in order to make that work. It's another point. I want to make one last point as well. I think a lot of this boils down to misunderstandings about what the conversation about morality actually is. What morality is, as I understand it, is a discourse about symmetry of relations between people, right? So this is the point of do unto others, right? The golden rule. It's that relations between peoples ought be symmetrical. It ought not be the case that I can, that I just run around doing things that other people cannot do to me, right? Or that I would not want to do to me, right? This is also the categorical imperative. Both of these moral formulations basically just boil down to human relations. They boil down to the regulation of symmetry between human relations. Um, that is what we're talking about, right? So rape, for instance, is a violation of that, right? I am robbing somebody of their sovereignty. I am creating a radically asymmetrical relationship. Murder is the same, right? Burglary is the same, right? These are ways of producing of subjects taking it upon themselves to produce asymmetrical relationships. Now, that being the case, they are by definition immoral. So yeah, it strikes me as being being the case that we can have this conversation about morality. We can ground morality discursively. We can ground more, and I think the other thing is that again the issue is very complex. I think that there are discursive dimensions to it. So again, normative dimensions to what morality is. I think that there are subjective aspects of what morality is, being tied to the structure of subjectivity and tied to reason. And there are also necessities, objective necessities, that the human subject is bound by. Again, struggle for subsistence, the fact of death, right? Like all of these things are just necessities. We as human beings need to cope with them. And notice that those are objective necessities as well. So it's not, I don't think, appropriate to say that morality is purely subjective or that morality is purely objective. The fact is, morality is a discourse which contains within it subjective phenomenon, intersubjective phenomenon, and objective phenomenon. And it's a denial of the richness of moral discourse to say that it's an either or proposition between it's either objective or it's subjective or something like this. Things are just much more complex than that. Clearly that's the case. So yeah, got a little bit of a headache, so that might not have been. Hope that was cogent. But yeah, have a good day.